In the far future, humanity's long-standing war with the Necronith Empire had stretched across centuries, becoming more than just a fight for survival. Entire human colonies had been wiped out. Planetary systems had fallen to the unstoppable march of the Necroniths, an alien race known for their overwhelming technology and unmatched military might. Generations of humans had been born into this war, with no memory of a time when peace was possible. Yet, despite the hopelessness of the situation, there was one figure who stood as a beacon of strength: General Caden Voss. Caden was not a leader who had risen to power through family ties or political connections, like many of his peers. He was a soldier, a tactician, a man whose mind had become a battlefield in itself. His reputation as one of humanity's most brilliant generals had been earned through countless victories, each one coming at a great cost. He was a strategist who always seemed to find a way to win, even when the odds were stacked against him. But his greatest challenge wasn't winning a battle, it was ending the war. Caden wasn't driven by the desire for fame or glory. He had no interest in revenge against the Necroniths. His only goal, the singular obsession that kept him awake at night, was to end the war and save humanity from the brink of extinction. After all these years of endless fighting, humanity had begun to lose its identity. The people weren't just soldiers anymore. They were the last remnants of a species fighting to hold on to the essence of what it meant to be human. If the war didn't end soon, humanity's soul might be lost forever. The war had already cost the human race so much. Entire fleets of ships had been destroyed in battles that served only to delay the inevitable. Worlds that had once thrived with life were now nothing but barren, scorched wastelands. The Necroniths were a force beyond comprehension, a nearly unstoppable enemy whose technology seemed to evolve faster than humanity could keep up. The longer the war went on, the more humanity's civilization began to crumble. It was during a routine raid on a Necronith research facility that Caden uncovered the object that would alter the course of the war. While the operation was supposed to be a simple strike against a supply base, something unexpected happened. Deep within the facility, hidden in a forgotten vault, Caden found a strange artifact. It was an object unlike anything humanity had ever seen, an ancient relic of unknown origin. At first glance, it appeared to be a simple metallic device, but the design was unlike anything Caden could comprehend. There were intricate patterns, symbols, and etchings along its surface, all pulsing with an eerie glow. Caden had seen many strange devices in his time as a soldier, but this was something different. He could sense it immediately. This artifact wasn't just a piece of alien technology, it was something far more significant. When he and his team examined it, they discovered it contained a series of cryptic data logs, a complex network of encrypted files that had been stored within its core for centuries. According to their analysis, the Necroniths had been obsessed with unlocking its secrets, but they had never succeeded. Caden was intrigued. He knew that the Necroniths had been hunting for this artifact for centuries, and it was clear that they saw it as the key to winning the war. But what had they been looking for? What was it about this object that could possibly tip the scales in humanity's favor? Could it hold the key to defeating the Necroniths once and for all? As Caden pored over the data, he found patterns that suggested the artifact wasn't merely a weapon, it was something far more dangerous. The encrypted files contained a message, one that had been hidden deep within the artifact's code. It was a warning, but it wasn't clear from whom or why it had been left there. The message spoke of a cosmic order, a secret that had been hidden for millennia. And as Caden dug deeper, the truth began to emerge, sending shivers down his spine. The artifact didn't just hold information about the Necroniths, it held the key to something much larger. Something beyond even their understanding. The message hinted at an ancient race of beings, long thought to be myth, who had once shaped the very fabric of the galaxy. These beings had left behind a technology capable of reshaping entire star systems. If Caden was right, the artifact was not just a weapon. It was a key to unlocking powers that could change the course of the entire war. But the more Caden investigated, the more unsettling the findings became. The data suggested that the Necroniths weren't simply interested in winning the war, they were trying to control this ancient power for themselves. And if they succeeded, it wouldn't just be humanity that would fall. The entire galaxy would be reshaped under the Necroniths' rule, and countless civilizations would be crushed under their heel. Caden knew this was his chance, a chance to end the war and save humanity. But there was a problem. The artifact wasn't just a weapon, it was a dangerous unknown. Activating it could unleash something powerful, but also something beyond control. Could humanity handle the power it might unlock? Or would it destroy everything they had fought for? As the days passed, Caden found himself caught in a moral dilemma. Should he reveal what he had found to humanity's leaders? Should he tell them about the potential dangers of the artifact, or should he use it as leverage to secure a better future for the human race? If he revealed it, he risked losing control of the artifact entirely. But if he kept it secret, humanity might never know the truth about the power they could wield. The decision weighed heavily on his conscience. He had always prided himself on being a soldier of integrity, but this was different. This artifact could change everything. Caden found himself torn between duty and ambition, between the need to protect humanity and the allure of the power that lay before him. He could never have anticipated that this simple raid would lead him to such a monumental crossroads. The future of humanity and the galaxy now rested on his shoulders. For the first time in centuries, hope flickered in the hearts of humanity. The discovery of the artifact had reignited the will to fight. Caden Voss, the battle-hardened general who had led his troops through countless defeats, could finally see a way out. The human military had begun to accelerate its efforts to decipher the artifact's data. Engineers and scientists worked day and night, trying to unlock its secrets. A few early tests with the artifact's energy outputs revealed something humanity had never encountered before: an immense power, far beyond their current understanding. For the first time, it seemed that the war might be tipping in humanity's favor. Yet, as the military intensified its focus on the relic, Caden felt an unsettling shift within himself. What was once a straightforward battle for survival had now become far more complicated. The deeper Caden dug into the artifact's data, the more he realized that the weapon hidden within wasn't merely a tool for destruction, it was a device capable of changing everything. The information contained within its encrypted files hinted at a deeper truth, one that had been hidden for millennia. The artifact was tied to an ancient galactic pact, a secret agreement forged by a forgotten race. This pact had bound all civilizations together, creating an unspoken law that prohibited any one species from achieving total dominance over the galaxy. It was a safeguard to prevent one civilization from becoming so powerful that it could reshape the galaxy in its own image. The pact had kept the balance of power stable for countless millennia, allowing the galaxy to thrive under the shared rule of many species. Caden quickly understood the implications of the artifact. It could give humanity the upper hand in the war, yes, but using it would come at a grave cost. If humanity activated the relic, they would be violating the ancient pact, essentially breaking the fundamental law that kept the peace between all species. The results could be disastrous. The disruption of the pact might unleash the dormant forces of the other galactic civilizations, provoking a war on a scale humanity had never imagined. The delicate balance that had held the galaxy together for so long would be shattered. The choice before him was daunting. Should he unleash the full power of the artifact, ending the war and securing humanity's survival, or should he hold back and protect the delicate harmony between the galaxy's species, even if it meant continuing the war with the Necroniths? The temptation to finally win, to break the endless cycle of fighting, was strong. But Caden was no fool. He knew the consequences of such an action could be far more destructive than the war itself. Caden kept these thoughts to himself for a while, unsure of how to approach the matter. But the longer he considered the possibilities, the more urgent the dilemma became. The military was growing restless. Leaders and commanders from all parts of humanity's fractured alliance began pushing for a decision. Some argued that the artifact was humanity's ticket to victory, that it was their destiny to rise and dominate the galaxy. Others, including the more cautious factions within the leadership, warned that the risks were too great. If humanity used the artifact, it would alienate the galaxy's other civilizations, possibly triggering a war that would consume everything. The pressure mounted, and Caden found himself increasingly isolated. His closest allies, the ones who had fought beside him through every battle, were now divided on what to do. His longtime strategist, General Olivia Dre, suggested they use the artifact, believing humanity was ready to seize the galaxy's power. She argued that the Necroniths had to be stopped once and for all, and this weapon was their only hope. But others, like Captain Harlan Jett, one of Caden's most trusted commanders, urged caution. He feared that using the artifact might lead humanity down a path that would ultimately corrupt them, just as it had corrupted countless civilizations before. Harlan had always been the voice of reason, and his warning struck a chord with Caden. As the debate raged on, Caden found himself struggling with the weight of leadership. What did humanity stand for if they discarded their moral compass in pursuit of victory? Was it worth sacrificing their values to save themselves from extinction? These questions gnawed at him. But the most troubling of all was the realization that the decision he faced wasn't simply about winning a war. It was about the future of humanity itself. Then came the betrayal. Captain Lysandra Tate, once Caden's most loyal and trusted lieutenant, made a shocking move. She had been the one to keep Caden grounded during the darkest times, the one who always seemed to understand his struggles. But one evening, she took a critical piece of data regarding the artifact and disappeared. Caden's heart sank when he learned she had defected to a radical faction within the human resistance, a faction that had long advocated for abandoning the Galactic Pact entirely. Lysandra had always believed that humanity needed to break free from the shackles of the ancient laws that bound them. She saw the Pact as a form of galactic oppression. The faction she had joined believed that the only way to secure humanity's future was to destroy the Pact, to break the galaxy's old rules, and assert humanity's dominance by any means necessary. In Lysandra's eyes, using the artifact was the only path forward. It was an opportunity to free humanity from the constraints imposed by the Galactic Order. This betrayal shattered Caden's sense of certainty. His closest ally had just thrown her lot in with those who would do anything to win, even if it meant destroying the very foundation of galactic peace. Caden couldn't shake the image of Lysandra's face, once full of loyalty and conviction, now clouded by her new beliefs. What had changed her? Had the war eroded her sense of morality just as it had eroded so many others? Caden wrestled with his doubts. His once clear path forward now seemed clouded with uncertainty. Humanity had spent centuries fighting to survive, but at what cost? The war had torn them apart. The artifact had offered them a chance to end it, but now it seemed to have become a symbol of everything humanity had fought against. Would victory at all costs be worth it? Was victory even possible if they lost what made them human in the process? As Caden faced his choices, the war continued to rage on, but the stakes had never been higher. The balance of the galaxy hung in the balance, and humanity's very soul was at risk. Caden had to decide, would he give in to the temptation of ultimate power and break the Galactic Pact, or would he stand by the principles he had always held dear, even if it meant prolonging the war and risking everything humanity had left? The tension within the human ranks had reached a boiling point. The discovery of the artifact, once a symbol of hope, had ignited a schism so deep that it threatened to tear the military and its leadership apart. Caden Voss had always prided himself on his ability to unite his troops in the face of adversity, but now he was struggling to hold together an army that had begun to fracture under the weight of its internal divisions. As military factions grew bolder in their confrontations, the situation became even more precarious. Those who wanted to use the artifact to dominate the galaxy clashed with those who believed humanity should respect the ancient Galactic Pact and its delicate balance. The once united forces under Caden's command were now separated into competing ideologies. Each one convinced their way was the only way forward. But just when it seemed the war with the Necroniths was on the verge of becoming a civil conflict, something unexpected happened, a moment that would change everything. In an attempt to push the human advantage and seize the power of the artifact, a rogue faction within the military decided to take matters into their own hands. They believed that humanity was already too entrenched in the war to turn back now, and that activating the artifact was the only way to ensure their survival. The rogue faction, led by an ambitious general named Matthias Kyle, sought to push the relic's power to its limits, believing it would give humanity the upper hand in the war. But they had miscalculated. The artifact, in all its cryptic complexity, had a secondary function that none of them fully understood. As Kale's forces activated the artifact's core, they triggered a galactic broadcast, a signal that reverberated through the entire galaxy, reaching every corner of known space. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. It wasn't just the Necroniths who felt the signal, it was all civilizations in the galaxy. And with the signal came the awakening of a long-dormant race, the Etherians. Caden had heard the legends of the Etherians, the ancient architects of the Galactic Pact, but he had dismissed them as myths, nothing more than stories passed down through generations. He had been wrong. The Etherians were not just a forgotten race, they were a living force, and their power far exceeded anything humanity or the Necroniths could ever hope to achieve. They were the true creators of the Galactic Pact, and they had been watching. Their civilization, built long before any of the current powers in the galaxy had risen, was light years ahead of everyone else. They possessed the ability to destroy entire star systems with a mere thought, and their wrath had been set in motion the moment humanity had dared to break the pact by tampering with the artifact. The Etherians didn't just want to control the galaxy, they wanted to preserve it, to keep it in balance. And the moment humanity had activated the artifact, they had declared war on everything the Etherians had built. The very existence of humanity, along with the other species who had fallen under the Pact's protection, was now at risk. Caden's world shattered as the reality of what had just transpired hit him. The war with the Necroniths, which had been humanity's primary concern for so long, now seemed insignificant in comparison. The galaxy was no longer just a battleground between two powers. It was a stage for a much larger, much more powerful conflict, one that humanity was woefully unprepared for. AS reports flooded in of Etherian ships appearing on the edges of known space. Caden could feel the gravity of the situation bearing down on him. His decisions had just led humanity to the brink of annihilation, and he had no idea how to pull them back. The Etherians' arrival wasn't just a threat to humanity. If the Etherians decided to intervene, they could wipe out entire star systems in the blink of an eye. And they were not interested in negotiating. They had already given their judgment. Humanity had broken the pact, and now they would pay the price. Caden stood at a crossroads. The choices that had once seemed so clear, how to use the artifact, how to win the war, were now irrelevant. The war with the Necroniths was nothing compared to the existential threat humanity now faced. But the biggest blow of all was the realization that the artifact was no longer just a weapon. It was the key to unlocking a conflict far larger than anyone could have predicted. The more Caden thought about it, the clearer it became. Humanity had come to this point by a series of miscalculations, and now they were facing the consequences. There was no longer any question of whether humanity should dominate the galaxy. That vision was gone, lost in the face of a far greater power. Instead, humanity's survival was at stake. Caden knew that he had to make an irreversible decision. He couldn't allow humanity to continue down a path that would inevitably lead to total destruction at the hands of the Etherians. But what could they do? The Etherians were too powerful, too far beyond anything humanity had ever faced. Their wrath would be catastrophic. The question was no longer how to win the war. It was whether humanity could survive the consequences of their actions. It was then that Caden came to a painful realization. The galaxy was too fractured, and the artifact's true power was too dangerous. Humanity could not continue its path of conquest and war. The artifact could offer them the ultimate victory, but it would cost them everything they had fought for. It would force humanity to turn against its own principles, abandoning everything that made them human in the process. Caden had always believed that humanity's strength lay in its ability to adapt, to rise above its circumstances and survive against all odds. But in this moment, he realized that humanity's future was no longer defined by brute strength or military superiority. It was about something much deeper. It was about morality, about what they were willing to sacrifice to survive. And so, Caden made his decision. He would relinquish the artifact. He would give up the power it offered, even though it meant that humanity's future was uncertain. It was the only way to preserve the balance of the galaxy and give humanity a chance at survival, even if it meant they would never achieve the dominance they once sought. The war had reached a new phase, one where survival was no longer about winning, it was about redefining humanity's place in the universe. and Caden knew that his decision would change everything. He could only hope that humanity would have the strength to rise again, not as conquerors, but as survivors. The decision came with the weight of 1,000 lives behind it, each one lost in the endless cycle of war. General Caden Voss stood on the precipice of a future that no one could predict, his fingers lingering just above the final command. He could feel the pulse of the artifact, now in his hands, a relic of unspeakable power that had changed the course of humanity's fate. It could be the key to their victory. It could guarantee their survival and elevate them above every other species in the galaxy. It could deliver them the ultimate power. But what if that power came at the cost of their humanity? For all the years he had spent leading his people in a brutal, unending war, Caden had never truly embraced the idea of domination. It wasn't the war he had wanted. It wasn't the victory he sought. The fight for survival had consumed everything: his soldiers, his leadership, even his soul. And now, with the artifact in his grasp, he realized something that had eluded him for so long. To wield such power would mean surrendering everything humanity had fought for. The war had turned humanity into something it never intended to become, a species defined by bloodshed, fear, and the relentless pursuit of power. Caden had seen too many faces, too many soldiers who had lost their sense of self in the chaos of endless fighting. The artifact, if used, could ensure humanity's survival in the galaxy for generations to come. But it would also bind them to a future where they had given up their autonomy in exchange for security. A future where they were nothing more than pawns in a greater cosmic game. Caden had never been a man of blind ambition. He wasn't willing to sacrifice humanity's core values just to win a war. So, in a moment that would echo throughout the galaxy, he made the decision that would alter the course of history. He destroyed the artifact. The explosion of energy from the artifact's destruction sent shockwaves through the galaxy, reverberating across systems and reaching the ears of every sentient being. The power that had once promised to reshape the universe was gone, reduced to nothing more than a memory. For humanity, this moment was both a relief and a curse. The war was over, but the cost had been staggering. With the artifact no longer a threat to the balance of the galaxy, the Etherians withdrew, their anger abated, at least for the time being. Humanity had made its stand, and the Etherians had realized that this was not a species they could simply destroy or control. There was something unpredictable about humanity, a fierce, raw will to survive that no force, no matter how powerful, could easily extinguish. But the true consequences of Caden's decision were only beginning to unfold. Without the artifact, without the power to dominate, humanity was now forced to confront the truth of its existence. The galaxy was no longer a battleground. There were no enemies to face, no war to win. What humanity had now was the future, one that was as uncertain as it was promising. Caden had believed that by ending the war, humanity would be free to chart its own course. What he hadn't expected was the new struggle that would arise, the fight to reclaim their humanity. For centuries, humans had been defined by their role as warriors. They had fought, not for glory, but for survival. They had clung to a belief that their power, their superiority, would be what saved them. Now that power was gone, and they were left to ask themselves, who were they without it? The question weighed heavily on Caden's mind. Could humanity find a way to survive without constantly seeking power? Could they rebuild their society on the ideals of cooperation, unity, and peace values that had been buried beneath the brutality of war? The galaxy would no longer fear humanity, but could humanity come to terms with its place in the universe? Weeks passed in a quiet, uneasy peace. Humanity had emerged from the shadow of its war-torn past, but now it faced the daunting task of healing. The leaders of the various human factions convened, not to discuss battle plans, but to negotiate a future. Old grudges lingered, and the scars of war were deep. The idea of peace was foreign, almost impossible. But Caden remained steadfast, determined to lead his people into a new era, one where the galaxy wasn't something to conquer, but something to be part of. Then, as the first signs of a new human world began to take shape, Caden received an unexpected message from an old ally. It was from Captain Lysandra Teet, his once loyal lieutenant, who had betrayed him months before, stealing critical data about the artifact. Kaidan had assumed she had defected to the radical resistance faction that wanted to destroy the Galactic Pact and usher in an era of human dominance. But now, her message was something entirely different. Lysandra had found a new path. She had discovered a way to unite humanity with the galaxy, not through conquest, but through shared strength and mutual respect. The galaxy was a diverse place, full of fractured species and broken alliances. But now, there was an opportunity to forge something new, a future where all races, including humanity, could work together to rebuild what had been broken. The galaxy, Lysandra believed, was finally ready for a new ideology, one where survival came not from power, but from understanding and collaboration. It was a message that shook Kaidan to his core. Lysandra had found a way forward. The past could not be erased, but perhaps, together, species could find a way to move beyond it. Kaidan was left with a choice once again. He had destroyed the artifact to preserve humanity's soul, but now he saw a new path, a path where humanity could rise not by imposing its will, but by finding common ground with the galaxy's other inhabitants. It was a path that would require humility, patience, and a willingness to trust in others, qualities that had been hard to come by in the war-torn human spirit. As Kaidan looked out over the peaceful horizon, he realized the greatest challenge humanity would face wasn't the remnants of the war, or the Etherians it was finding its place in a galaxy that had once feared them. The war was over, but humanity's true battle was just beginning. The fight to prove that they could survive and thrive not as conquerors, but as equals. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in centuries, it was theirs to shape.